Looking for a safe and reliable service to help kickstart your team on FC26? Then check out IGGM, where you can buy coins with cheap rates, quick delivery, and guaranteed safety. With the link in the description, use my promo code NA at checkout for 7% off. What's up, guys? It's been a while, but FC26 is finally around the corner. And for those that aren't new to this channel, you probably noticed that there's been no new content from me for months. And to be honest, that's basically pretty representative of how FC25 ended. Now, I don't want to talk too much about FC25 in this video, but to keep it short, to be quite honest, it was my least favorite FIFA in a long time. It just wasn't a really good game. The gameplay was really gimmicky and it did not reward actual skill in terms of a football game. So to become the best at FC25, you had to abuse a lot of silly glitches that were somehow considered actual game mechanics, from things like the L1 speed boost or, just stupid first time through balls and things like this. But FC26 is going to release in about 12 days from the time of me releasing this video, 11 days actually. And it's time that we talk about whether or not FC26 is actually going to be better. And I wanted to do a completely unbiased discussion about this game with everything I've seen so far, from things such as beta gameplay that I played, from leaks to things that EA have said on this game, and talk about whether or not we should feel optimistic and decide whether or not FC26 is worth buying or not, or if you've already bought FC26, whether or not you've made a good decision on doing such. And I think it's really important to have an unbiased discussion about this, mostly because I feel like there's been a lot of very positive discourse and communication about FC26 on social media and things like that, especially from other content creators, which is fine, of course, but with all due respect to people like this, I think that they are less obligated to be critical of FC26, primarily because they were given communication directly by EA. Now, I'm not saying EA are forcing these people to be positive about FC26, but think about it like this: if EA are giving you a big chance to work with them and give you like a basically communicate directly with you and show a willingness to work with you in terms of communication with FC26, you're more likely to be positive about FC26 because that's an opportunity to have. Now, personally, I don't have that opportunity. I'm completely independent. I've not spoken to EA under any capacity. So for me, it's going to be really easy to just be fully honest about FC26. But to get that question out the way, is FC26 actually going to be worth it? Instead of just saving this for the end of the video, is it going to actually be better than the previous games? And honestly, my answer is a slightly cautious yes. I'm actually a bit excited for FC26, and I feel much more excited than I did for FC26 than I did for 25, even 24, to be quite honest. And I'll mention why in a moment. But there's so many things that in FC26 that we have to talk about individually, so I'm going to break down what we're going to talk about specifically, but it's going to be mostly about gameplay, which is, in my opinion, the only thing that matters in terms of releasing the game. Now, obviously, there's Ultimate Team and things like the power curve, microtransactions, all these things, and that's a really valid discussion to have. But in terms of actually releasing this game, the biggest issue with this game right now, in my opinion, has been gameplay, and that's what this video is dedicated towards. Because with good gameplay, it's going to be what determines whether this game is going to be good or not. And before we talk about this topic, I wanted to mention that I'm currently building my Discord server to basically act as a trading hub for FC26. I know there's a lot of paid servers and things like that for that, if you're trying to get into trading bots and all that stuff. Now, obviously, I'm not going to have a trading bot. I don't do that type of stuff. However, if you're looking for a free Discord server where you just want to talk about FC26, whether it's trading, making coins, finding hidden evos, trading filters, or even other things like looking for a club for pro clubs, or just literally anything that's related to football even, you can join my Discord with the link in the description. On top of that, I'm starting a new Twitch RTG for FC26 as soon as the game releases. Now, I want to do something like a Paul Pogba RTG or something where I use Pogba in every single match until the game ends or something like that, but I'm not fully decided on what player I'm going to use, but that's overall what I'm trying to do. So if you're looking for a Twitch stream for an RTG like this, you can find that with the link in the description. And for those that are not subscribers, if you don't know who I am, you can see in my channel I make a lot of custom tactics. I try to teach people how to play the game, people that are less experienced at the game how to play. But this year around, I want to show more gameplay. I want to do RTG content. I feel like that's also a good way to help people improve by showing them high quality gameplay, which is something I'll try to do this year. So if that's something that you're looking for, go ahead and subscribe. But yeah, guys, with that being said, it's time we talk about gameplay. As for gameplay, I've clocked about 20-ish hours over the 3-week beta for FC26, so I've played a lot of the beta for what it's worth. Now, obviously, I cannot really show you unfiltered gameplay footage for FC26 because it's got that watermark and stuff all over it, and this video will probably get taken down if I did. But I made sure to write down basically everything that was really important in terms of FC26. And guys, the gameplay is just so much better than FC25, and I'll mention why in a moment. And it's also really important that I clarify. I know people are gonna be like, well, the gameplay is obviously gonna be better because you're on, empty servers. The gameplay is gonna feel smoother, and yeah, that's valid. That's very true. However, at the same time, there's just so many aspects that aren't relevant to just necessarily better server performance that I'll mention in a moment. There's things that EA have done that you would notice regardless of the servers being good or not. And to be quite honest, I feel like the server performance is probably going to be way better with what EA have talked about. I feel like the game's going to be way better optimized, so servers aren't just going to always be, screwing you over every single game. But yeah, first things first, the biggest difference for me so far that I think everyone will notice is going to be AI defending. And basically, AI defending is just so much more weaker. And what I mean by this is the fact that, first things first, you need to learn to control CBs, or center backs. And what I mean by this is if you're the type of player to just run around your CDMs, using your 98 rated maxed out Gillet and letting your CBs just stand there doing like absolutely nothing because that's all they need to do. They're like the AI is just defending for you. You're gonna get absolutely destroyed. Like, I seriously mean it. Like, you're going to struggle in defense. The reason why I say this is because I was playing players like this on the beta who would just run around through CDMs like they do in FC25. They don't actually defend. They're just standing there waiting for you to basically just give them the ball back because the AI is actually doing all the work. I was scoring like 10 goals on these guys. I'm not even joking. Like, simply because they would not switch to a center back and actually try to defend, trying to tackle, trying to win the ball back. I was scoring so many goals on them. The reason why I say this is because AI defending is so much more weaker. The AI is decent, but it's not enough to compensate against. It's not enough to just carry you in terms of defense. When you're defending, you actually have to do most of the work while the AI just, fills in the gaps, rather than it being the other way around where in FC25 the AI did all the work and you just filled in all the gaps. If you just stand there letting this AI do all the work, you're going to cook your opponent, or you're going to get cooked, I mean. Notably, it's things like, your strikers or opposing strikers making a run in behind. Your AI do not track them as intelligently and aggressively as they did in FC25. So if you just stand there, it'll be very easy for strikers to get in behind. They might track them sometimes, but for the most part, they do not track them nearly as effectively as they did in FC25. That's just one aspect that I'm talking about here. There's more than just through balls and player runs that I'm talking about. You actually have to learn how to player switch. And that brings us to the next topic here, which is another big variable in terms of the player gap, which, like I mentioned earlier, the skill gap, or the player gap. You could call it a player gap, but skill gap makes more sense. I felt like FC25 lacked a significant skill gap. You could play someone and not really understand whether or not you won or lost because you're the better or worse player. But sometimes you just lose because the other player just spammed a mechanic more often than you got to. And that's not fair for a competitive game. It should not be about who spams something more to score, more L1 speed boosts or more AI defending or all these things like that. FC26 has a bigger consideration for the skill gap, so things that separate you from your opponent in terms of actual quality in terms of a football game, you'll notice these things more. And like I said, this brings us to the next variable for this, which is a new variable. It's been in the game this whole time, but it's now actually really important to decide whether or not you're better than your opponent, and that's going to be player switching. It's now really important to be a good player switcher because, like I mentioned earlier, if you're not switching to center backs and things like that, if you're not switching to, counter a certain situation in terms of how the other player is attacking you, you're just not going to defend well. Like, you cannot stand there and let the opponent come to you and think that that's all you have to do to defend. You actually have to player switch properly. If your opponent is about to send a through ball, you need to switch your center backs to block the through ball. If your opponent's passing around, you need to learn how to press and predict the passes, because if you let the player pass around, then eventually they'll open up a big pocket of space in the box and you're cooked. And on top of things like this, which is pretty obvious, there's also another aspect that EA have included where there's going to be a stamina drain in terms of using AI. Now, how EA are currently doing this is players that are being controlled by the AI will have a slow stamina drain, while players that you control with your left stick are not going to lose stamina. Now, this makes no sense in terms of realism because you would think that all your players would lose stamina as they play, but now the players that you are controlling are not going to lose stamina. Now, this sounds like it's a bad thing, but it's actually a really, really good thing, and I'll explain why. Because if you're just holding down one player and just running around with them the whole time, like, yeah, you get to preserve their stamina, but that's one player out of 10. That means the entire center back
or the entire defensive line is going to have no stamina by the end of the game. And if your defensive line has no stamina, then by the end of the game, they're just going to go completely brain dead. Their AI is going to just be stupid. And you might have, a CDM with really high stamina, but now your center backs have low stamina. And they're just going to make mistakes. You're not going to be effective. You're not going to be a good player if you're not a fundamentally good player switcher. It's going to be a new part of the game where you can divide player A from player B and figure out which one's better at the game, in terms of defending at least, by their ability to player switch. But yeah, that's mostly about defense, and that's basically the biggest changes they've made towards defense, and I think that's going to be one of the biggest things you'll notice in FC26. So there's something else I wanted to mention as well, and that's going to be things like bounce backs and those lucky deflections that are just really annoying. And they've been addressed this year, and the thing is, to be quite honest, I feel like EA have addressed this every single year since FIFA 23. They're like, oh yeah guys, we fixed bounce backs, we fixed deflections, we fixed tackles, and they say, but it always feels like every single game there's always that one goal you concede where it's just like ridiculous ping pong, like the ball just bounces around in the box. Even if you're getting perfect tackles, you're just getting silly animations, and then at the end of it just bounces around 3 defenders, and then coincidentally just lands right in front of the opposing striker, and they just get a free tap in. And goals like this are so annoying because it just feels like you're just conceding because you're just unlucky. And I will say, to be quite honest, yes, this is still technically in the game. I've still seen it happen. However, you can tell EA have scripted the game to prevent this from happening entirely. And what I mean by this is, you can now tell that the game is deliberately coded to where all deflections and bounce backs, they're scripted now to not go back to the opponent and instead return possession back to you. So what I mean by this is, once you'll notice this in game when you play, and once you pay attention and look for it, you're going to notice that there's going to be it's going to look unrealistic, if anything. It's going to look kind of stupid in terms of realism. So if you're looking for realism, it's not going to be there. It's just going to look funny if you pay close attention to it. But just imagine every single deflection. Let's say you make a pass and the opposing defender blocks it. It gets a deflection or a bounce back or whatever. Imagine every single deflection or a bounce back always going back to the other opponent, rather than it just being a 50-50 chance of you just getting the ball back and getting lucky. So you're not going to just be able to just fluke your way into goals like that pretty often. It's still going to happen sometimes. I noticed that it was still happening. However, what I noticed is that when I was playing FC25, or when I was playing FC26, the beta, and then hopping back on FC25, it was just a completely different world in terms of bounce backs. It just made, quite honestly, when I was playing FC26, I could not go back to playing FC25. I just could not have fun because I'd played one match of FC25, and I was like, man, I just want to play FC26 again, or at least the beta again. But yeah, like I said, this new concept that they've done for scripting the ball to not bounce back, it doesn't look realistic, of course, but at the end of the day, this is a competitive video game. I'm guessing if you play the new offensive game mode that they added, you're not going to see this, which is fine in my opinion. I'm not looking for, immersive realism in terms of Ultimate Team. It's already not immersive enough. I'd rather have a quality gameplay experience that's not realistic, but competitive. So yeah, another thing to mention is the statistical disparity in terms of player cards. And what I mean by this is, I felt in FC25 stats did not actually matter that much. You couldn't see a difference between 90 shooting to 80 shooting, things like that. 90 pace did not matter because a 70 pace defender will catch up. All shots felt the same, especially if you can get the green time in, or especially if you can abuse Trivelas. Stats did not matter that much, but now they matter way much more than they ever did. What I mean by this is, for example, 90 plus pace is going to be much more deadly than it was, last year. Especially now in the beginning of FC26, where you're not going to have defenders with 90 plus pace unless you're lucky and you just get someone that has high pace. But until then, when your defenders are probably going to have 75, 80, maybe 85 pace, and you're going against strikers that have 90 plus pace, especially with, chem styles, you'll notice that, that difference in your gameplay. Your center backs, they're going to get gaps. And it's not just pace where you'll notice things like this, the disparities, but shooting as well feels really different from, a 70 shooting card to a 90 shooting, especially with the playstyles. And the reason why I say this is because of the removal of time finishing. They didn't literally remove time finishing. Now, obviously, you can no longer green shots. You can't just double tap shoot and get a green. You can't do that anymore. However, in a way, EA technically kept time finishing, and I'll explain why. Instead of just double tapping shoot, timing it right, and getting a green to get a green time shot where you just score an absolute rocket, instead of doing that, you have to put yourself in a position to get a good shot, like a perfect shot. And it's hard to explain, but it's basically like an appeal to realism. So if you ever watch like a football match and you notice that the opposing striker is about to shoot, and before he actually shoots, you're like, oh yeah, like he's gonna score this. And you say this because that player is in a good position to shoot. Maybe he's right in front of the goalkeeper, or maybe he just has this really good angle to shoot from. I don't know what the case may be, but you know what I mean, where you're just watching a football match and you notice that before the shot is actually shot, like you can predict the goal from actually happening. What I mean by this is that in FC26, it's really important that you have good separation from your defenders. So if you have defenders on your shoulder, you're not going to get a clean shot. You're not going to get a green time shot. You need to have the ball in a good position, so you can't just have it at weird off angles. You gotta be like, actually pointing at goal. You can't do some silly ball roll it, and then Trivela. You can't do that anymore. I mean, you can try, but you're not gonna score the same way you did in FC25. Because in FC25, you can be in a weird shooting position. You can be in a position where you should not be shooting, but if you green it, then it goes in. Especially if you Trivela it. So you notice that sometimes you just get this really powerful shot, or this really strong shot that you're like, oh shoot, did I like green this? But you didn't actually green it. It just EA basically gave you a green time shot because you deserved it in that moment. And that means you were in a position where you were in a really good goal scoring position. Maybe you were one-on-one with the keeper, or maybe you were in a perfect angle to do a finesse shot, like outside the box, at the edge of the box with the proper angle, and there's no defender in front of you to block the shot, as well as no defender like physically touching you, which is really important because that means long shots are still going to be viable. However, they're still going to be really easy to stop as well. Because if you're a player that constantly finds yourself finding separation at the edge of the box where you can just send a shot without it being blocked or imposed on, you'll be able to score from outside the box with finesses, of course. Not like from ridiculous ranges, of course. Still gotta be like around 25 yards from that box, 25 yards from the goal, and the goal will go in without having to literally double tap shoot to get that green. But basically what I'm saying here is you have to deserve the goal in order to get that green time quality shot. And this also includes stats as well, like I mentioned. You're not going to get this effect with 70 shooting, like not at all. Like with 70 shooting, you can say bye-bye to that. Like with 70 shooting, like you need to basically score tap-ins. You're not going to score consistently under any capacity without, having high shooting. When you have 90 plus shooting, you'll notice that you'll have more leniency in terms of, separation, space from the defenders, things like that. You'll be able to get away with more difficult finishes, if that makes sense, rather than just higher power finishes or faster finishes or things like that. Next thing we can talk about is the L1 speed boost, and specifically the overall concept of stupid gameplay mechanics. But straight up, the L1 speed boost is just completely removed, and the best part about this is that means as it stands, unless EA release another stupid gameplay mechanic, or another gameplay mechanic is discovered that is just ridiculously overpowered and gets spammed every game. Until then, there's no more mechanics that are just ridiculously overpowered and used as a crutch by non-skilled players to spam in order to get results. So what I mean by this is, right now we had L1 speed boost and green time finishing as well, but that also means things like if you play older FIFAs, maybe like as old as FIFA 21 with the directional nutmegs, or FIFA 24, FC24 with the speed boosts from stepovers. Stuff like this does not exist anymore. There's nothing you can spam anymore. There's no more, 30 yards green time Trivelas where you just do a ball roll, you green it, and it just goes in. There's nothing like this anymore. Every goal you score is going to look completely different than your previous goal, which is a huge deal. This means that you're not going to get by playing FC20 or FC26 by just spamming one thing over and over and over again. It's not going to work. There's nothing to spam anymore. You actually have to be good at the game for once. You have to fundamentally be good at a FC26 game, or just a football game in general. You just have to be a good player. And that's a huge deal, because this is the first FIFA I feel where you have to just be good at football for it to work. You do not have to just be good at, spamming things. You just got to be good at football, Another thing to mention is attacking AI. And attacking AI is just so much more smarter. Like, it's ridiculous how much better it is. Once you get a feel at FC26's AI in terms of attack, you won't want to play FC25 again. I'm so serious. Like, the runs they make in attack, especially if you encourage good runs by, playing good passing, trying to encourage good runs by passing to certain zones, passing to certain players, making sure everyone gets, touches on the ball, forcing your opponent to make players move out of position, especially since they do have to player switch more often now. Your attackers are going to be more conscious of gaps in the opponent's defense and will be more aggressive towards how they position themselves in the box, but also just in attack in general in the final third. So what I mean by this is wingers will now track more centrally, instead of just hanging wide and just staying at the edge of the box or the sideline. And midfielders, on your team at least, they're going to crash the box, enter the box more frequently, especially when they see space. On top of that, there's that new box crusher role, which means that that role will now specialize in just directly crashing the box. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. In general, your attacking players are going to flow more. There's going to be more tactics that you can succeed with. And your player AI is going to be more unique and expressive per game. So every single goal you score, every single game you play is going to feel different. Another thing to mention is the passing quality, and it's much more different than FC25. It's way smoother, way quicker. I forgot what it was called, but EA released a new mechanic for FC26 where I think it was called one frame passing or something like that, and you'll notice it in game. Basically, as soon as you press the button, the pass goes. Now, it's not going to mean that you get a perfect pass. You're still going to get bad passes, but the delay for passing is completely removed. As soon as you press the button, the pass goes. It'll say fuck the animation, the pass will go. You might even get some weird animations that don't look realistic, but like I said, realism is not the goal in terms of Ultimate Team, as evidently shown, because competitiveness is more important. Getting a game that reflects the skill gap between player A to player B is more important for a competitive game. But like I mentioned, one frame passing, as soon as you press the button to pass, the pass goes. Really fast passing. And I was able to notice this because when I went back to play FC25, especially when I was playing the Gritty to Glory tournament where you have to use rare gold players, I realized the passing was so bad. I was like, how the fuck was I playing FC25 this whole time? It was ridiculous. FC26 is way different in terms of passing. You don't need incisive ping, tiki-taka. You don't need the passing playstyles to get good passing gameplay. Now, obviously, you'll still notice the improvement if you can get these playstyles in FC26, but you do not need these anymore. Your players can actually pass without fucking up every single pass without the playstyles. There's also dribbling. Now, dribbling now is way less clunkier and it's more agile, it's more quicker. Your players will turn quicker and they respond way more smoothly to adjustments with the left stick. So if you're someone that loves playing with the left stick dribbling, you love cutting in and between defenders, this is your game just for that. Now, this is a mixture of things like having way better server response, which is something that I noticed. Servers respond way better now. The menus are way smoother in-game. There's less loading screens, less delay. It's just way quicker. The game's just quicker in general. Outside of just gameplay, it's just the menus, the loading screens. Overall responsiveness is just way quicker. FC25 was, in terms of the menus at least, was the slowest FC game or FIFA game I could think of in recent memory. It was ridiculous how slow it was. You can notice this as soon as you went from FC24 to FC25. The game got slower, if anything, in terms of menus and things like that. But yeah, back to the concept of dribbling or the point of dribbling. The better dribbling is a mixture of having way better servers and server quality, but it's also a direct noticeable improvement to dribbling mechanics. Your left stick dribbling is going to feel way smoother. The animations are going to react way better towards the small adjustments you make with your left stick. And since there's no skill moves to spam, there's no OP skill moves that are spammable. Dribbling is going to be a direct reflection of, player skill. So a good dribbler will dribble good, if that makes sense, and they will play good at the game. Next I want to mention, but this is exclusive to my PC players out there. It's going to be really quick because I'm guessing most of you guys are not PC players, but for my PC players, to be quite honest, FC25 was the worst FIFA I've ever played in terms of optimization. And I literally had RTX 4090, which is ridiculous. I should not be having issues. For FC25, my game would chop frames, I would have frame drops, I would crash, I would have visual effects. It was annoying. But FC26 was the complete opposite experience. My FPS was higher, if anything, and on top of it being higher, I did not have FPS drops, I did not have stuttering. The graphics were better, and I still got higher FPS, so they've clearly done a big improvement towards performance. Now, I don't know if this will apply to console as well, but I know for PC this is really important. Now, like I said, I want to be completely honest about FC26, so I wanted to have a chapter to the bad things as well. I'm not being honest if I'm not mentioning the things that, I don't like about FC26, so I have to mention them, of course. Now, some of these are just minor issues, to be quite honest, because, like I said, I'm just really happy with FC26 as it stands, so there's not too much I can complain about, but there are a couple things. And, maybe if I do mention them, maybe if I talk about them, EA can notice them and improve it in the future. Now, funnily enough, before I even get to talk about the bad things, I just want to quickly mention one of the things I was going to, say was one of the bad things when I was writing the script was the low driven shots. And to be honest, During the time of the beta, the low driven shots were just ridiculously fucking overpowered. Like, it was so fucking stupid. You were scoring from ridiculous angles with long shots, or sorry, not long shots, low driven shots, even if you didn't have the playstyle. But funnily enough, like hours ago from me working on the script, EA posted patch notes where they basically just said, yeah, we're going to nerf low drivens for the official release of the game. And that's perfect. That's a good thing, because it means EA are addressing what the community is actually saying as OP, which they could have done the entirety of last year when people were bitching about, you know, the L1 speed boost, the things like that were just ridiculously overpowered. But now they're doing it before the game has even released, so that's a huge deal for me. And on top of that, EA mentioned that they're going to commit to monthly patch notes throughout FC26, where not only are they updating the game every month and the gameplay, but they're also going to specifically focus on the patch notes, where they talk about basically just community outreach, just talking about addressing concerns of gameplay, power curve, all the things like the community may be complaining about or talking a lot about. And that's a huge deal, because good communication and connection with the community is going to be huge in terms of reflecting the quality of FC26. Now, with that being said, let's talk about the bad things. And first of which, I want to talk about formation variety, and this makes me really sad because I love, you know, playing with new formations and things like that, but there's just a lack of effective formation variety. And what I mean by this is that this is still the case where there's just only a couple formations that are the best in the game, and then everything else is either average or unplayable. And what I mean specifically is, number one, formations that have CDMs on them are going to be the meta simply because CDMs are better in defense than center mids, because center mids do not track back the same quality and the same AI as center defensive mids. But center defensive mids are going to offer basically the same advantage and utility that a center mid will offer in attack, especially with the new CDM role called the box crasher, which basically turns a CDM into a center mid practically in attack, but you can't turn a center mid into a CDM in defense. The center mid holding does not track back the same way as a CDM holding, but a box crasher CDM attacks basically just, matter of fact, a CDM on box tracker, or sorry, I can't even talk. A CDM on box crasher attacks better than a center mid on playmaker, which is kind of OP, or not necessarily OP, but just not really fair, because a CDM on any role will defend better than any center mid, which is ridiculous. So this means that any formation with CDMs in it is going to be better than a formation that does not have CDMs in it. So that means it's like, what, five formations in the game that are going to be the best ones, and then everything else is a tier below. So unfortunately, this does mean rules like, or formations like your 4-2-3-1, or both variations of the 4-2-3-1, the 4-2-2-2, the 4-2-1-3, formations like this, they're still going to be the best ones in the game, as they were in FC25. Another thing to mention, Trivelas are still kind of OP, and they're not OP the same way where you could just green them from like 30 yards out and just score every single time. But Trivelas are still going to happen pretty often if you can get the roll for them. They're still pretty useful. Now, like I said, it does require a playstyle plus. I don't remember if it was called Inventive or Game Changer, but it was one of those. But if you can get one of these rolls, they're still, or one of those playstyles, they're still pretty OP. Not necessarily like crazy OP, but they're still kind of strong. You'll still see a lot of Trivelas that you don't really see in real life, if that makes sense. You don't see anyone pull off a Trivela in real life that often, but you're going to see it a lot in game, if that makes sense. So it's whatever. It's not a huge deal, but personally, just, I don't know, I think it looks funny. Another thing to mention, this isn't necessarily a bad thing yet because it obviously hasn't happened yet, but I'm very worried about this, and it's play locking. And play locking could become the meta very quickly for this game, and it could become the new thing that gets spammed. And I don't like playing a FIFA game or an FC game where there's one mechanic that is king and gets spammed every single match, because it just makes every game feel the same. Now, since everything else has been removed, there's no more green time finishing, there's no more L1 speed boost, there's nothing else that can be abused, I think player locking is next in line to be spammed. And in a way, I'm not 100% sure if this is going to be good or bad, because player locks do take a little bit of skill. It's not the same as the L1 speed boost where you can spam it the same way. It's still kind of hard to player lock, especially doing it right. But at the same time, once you go get someone that knows how to player lock, it's really annoying to play against. So I'm not 100% sure if this is going to be a huge deal, but I wanted to mention it because I might end up predicting this to be the case. People might just learn how to spam player locks, and maybe FC26 deserves player locks. Maybe that's a good fundamental in terms of skill gap. Maybe the game deserves players to player lock and be good player lockers in terms of deciding whether or not they're good at the game. And if that's the case, so be it. Maybe that's fair. That's up to you guys to decide. Or maybe player locks do get nerfed one day. Maybe everyone starts spamming them, and then EA are like, okay, we're gonna nerf the fuck out of this, and maybe they add something like a 1 or 2 second delay between the player's beginning of the lock towards, them making a responsive run or something like that. I'm not sure, but we'll see one day. And finally, the final concern I have is a lot of what EA says right now is just promises rather than just it being immediate changes. Now, I mentioned a lot of immediate changes with things like, passing, dribbling, stat disparity, but there's other things, in terms of like the patch notes, server performance, things like this that EA have stressed that we kind of just literally have to trust them in terms of the game being better. And that's hard to do because EA have had good releases before where they have good PR from the beginning of the game release is really good, maybe the first couple of weeks have good gameplay, and then everything just falls apart somehow. Now, to be honest, I'm least worried about this more than ever because I feel like EA are doing all the right things to prevent this. They're being really honest, they're being really transparent more than ever, and I do feel like I can trust EA here, but I do think in general that's just hard to do because they've not been trustworthy in the past. But personally, I can do it. I think if we trust EA here, we'll get what we're looking for in terms of a FC game. But yeah, guys, just to rephrase it, I am personally excited for FC26. I think FC26 has potential to be one of the best FIFA games in about the past, 8 years. Like, quite literally, and I'm cautiously saying this because I'm not going to put money on it. I'm not 100% sure because, like I mentioned, EA could just be lying and everything could just go out the window by October or November and they could just go back to what the fuck they were doing in FC25. But as it stands, that's not the case for me. I don't think that's going to happen. I think this is the one release where that's not the case. I think FC26, like I mentioned, I think FC26 has potential to be one of the best FIFA games in recent times. I think we're finally getting a FIFA game, or even just a football game in general, where you get rewarded for being good at football, which is so much to ask for nowadays. You're getting a competitive game that is still fun. You can win games on FC26 without, feeling angry or feeling like a sweat. And when you lose games, you'll be like, oh shoot, I deserve to lose because this guy's better than me. I can lose with pride, if that makes sense. And yeah, guys, I'm really excited. But in terms of FC26, that's all. I'm going to start releasing more content in anticipation of FC26 and for the release of FC26. So that's something that you're looking for. Go ahead and subscribe if you haven't already. Follow me on Twitch. Join our Discord from the link in the description. Let me know in the comments down below if you have any questions you want answered about FC26 because I've basically figured out a lot of FC26 already. So if you have any questions, let me know down below. But for that, guys, that's all.